This is your host Sreem bin Mohammed Rafi, and here is my YouTube channel Zamir Universal. Those who still think that there is any decency, any even feeling left for another human being, and you are not dealing with beasts and animals and the worst and the scum of the society, worse than Adolf Hitler, and lying, liars, and you can see for themselves this, in this self-destruction what they have been doing to the culture of the Palestinian people, and how could they just be only for October the 7th? Can anybody in the world think that you would destroy the culture which is hundreds and thousands years old? And I'll show you the glimpse and the documentary, the best documentary I have seen, produced by Al Jazeera, both how they destroyed culture of Gaza, culture of Palestine, how they stole the artifacts, how the Moshe Dayan, how Netanyahu, how all the prime ministers before them, and they sold it in the open market, how they destroyed their mosque, their museums, their oldest mosque after the Masjid al-Aqsa, they targeted and destroyed that, the universities, the hospitals. You can see for yourself what they wanted was to destroy that so that it becomes uninhabitable, it becomes like a desert, so that they can go and sell that desert, and so that their women can walk over there with napkins and bikinis. What a hell this is, what a scam, this simply thrown out of this world. They are not a part of this planet. No wonder for thousands of years they've been thrown out in many countries more than once, and they were the most disliked people on earth are these Jews. Now the real Jews want to quit that. The chief rabbi wants to spit on the face of Netanyahu, and he doesn't want any of those Jews who really believe in Torah to fight in IDF, and they said they will leave in that. Already about half the left who have dual nationality, when they leave, there are only a few thousand of these rascals, these idiots, these warmongers, these war criminals, these people who are bloodsuckers, parasites, and genocide, and this they are the only one will be inhabited there, and you will enclave them like rats, and that is their punishment now. And this decade is going to see the fall of a number of countries, which I am not just going to predict here, right? Number one is going to be the United States, broken into pieces. The one state which has trillions and trillions of its own money from the oil, which is greater than the total receipts which the United States of America receives, they will be fighting with this. They will be the first one to separate, and the next one will be California. And that will be the start of disintegration of the United States of America, and it will be in their own doing. And it will be Joe Biden's time which will be remembered in history as the blackest period in the world, because he's a liar, he's a cheater. He himself said he is the greatest Zionist. So imagine yourself, how can he be Christian? How can Jill Biden have any sympathy and faith? And he says that she is the best woman in my life when she sees that her husband is eating the dead Palestinian Gazan children at his breakfast, at his lunch, and at his dinner. And that is why 99% of his cabinet in the White House is the Jews, and none of them is a non-Jew except that the Secretary of Defense, and that he just kept it as a colored man, otherwise, and only to get their votes from the non-whites. Otherwise, he would have even thrown him out.
And handcuffed me and put me on the floor, start beating me, took my brother, stormed in my house, destroy everything, whatever you can imagine. They didn't leave anything, and then they took me without clothes, without shoes, outside, and then they start to take poses with me and take selfies and pictures. They put some costumes on me, and they start taking these pictures to show their girlfriends how heroes they are. And then they took us with other Palestinians and people from the camp to the checkpoint. They throw us in the field, still handcuffs and blindfolded in the cold, in the rain, in the mud. And then hours later, they took us to the intelligence center called Salem, and for sure interrogate us in a way torturing us psychologically and mentally, making all these sounds, screaming. You cannot do anything. You cannot say anything.
You
People were
describe a
sick, old people.
you describe a very traumatic experience, even though you say this is nothing out of the ordinary for Palestinians. In 2011, the co-founder of the theater, Giuliano Mirhamis, was killed, and the Freedom Theater has been under constant threats for several years. Why do you think that is? What in your work and the work of the Freedom Theater is triggering this kind of reaction, response to by the Israeli authorities?
Yes, for a long time with the Israeli propaganda, were presenting the Palestinian in a totally different picture. They were dehumanize us and show us to the world that we are terrorists and we are animals and we are savage. But, you know, culture, Freedom Theater managed to humanize again the Palestinian character and bring it to the world with a new style, with a modern picture that shows the reality, how the Palestinians are artists, educated, and they are aware of everything is going on in this planet. And for sure, that's what the occupation does not want to show the Palestinian real picture. They want make the Muslims, Arabs, especially Palestinians, even fighters, resistance, that we are looking like a terrorist, like, you know, ISIS and all these crazy names they create to scare the world and keep that supported for the occupation. But for sure, the Israeli army been attacked the Freedom Theater from especially after the Second Intifada 2002, and they killed and assassinated Giuliano Mirhamis, the main founder of the Freedom Theater, because they know how strong art and culture can fight them. And for us, we believe, and Giuliano was believing, that the Third Intifada will be an artistic, cultural intifada through theater, through poetry, through dance. We will bring our story to the whole world. And that's what is happening actually. After this social media and people start to using all these platforms, they start to see through theater and art and all these kind of forms that the Palestinian resisting in a very, let's say, different way than everyone expecting. And we reach many communities all over the world. And that's what is changing the story and shows the real face of the occupation and West and America.
The next intifada will be an artistic one. Mayar, I would like your take here. I saw you nodding several times. Do you think Israel has been deliberately arresting, targeting cultural institutions, cultural workers?
Look, I'm no political analyst, but what I can say is I constantly sit down and think about, and I know that this is morbid, but I constantly sit down and think about how do you create a genocide, right? Like, you create atrocities on the ground, you target cultural institutions, universities, museums, cultural heritage sites, and then you start to target the cultural creators. So the poets, the writers, the artists, basically the people who are reclaiming their own narratives and writing about the atrocities that they go through every single day. So every day I'm sitting here thinking about, well, how do you actually erase a people? And that's how you do it. So I do agree. I do completely agree with what
Ahmed just said. It's a very...
just said that it will be...
And it's a very powerful statement, Serena, to say that the next intifada could be cultural, could be artistic. What is your take here in terms of what's been happening until now and Israel's position with regards to Palestinian culture, Palestinian art, everything that humanizes Palestinians, as Ahmed put it?
Yes, so historically, this is not the first time that Palestinian cultural institutions have been targeted. In the 1940s, Al Hamra Cinema was targeted, in the National Museum in Jerusalem in 1948. And then, of course, the looting of Palestinian archives, which included films, photos, and music. To this day, Palestinians do not have access to those. They're being stored in the Israeli archives. So this is not the first time. There is a concerted effort, an intentional effort, to target Palestinian cultural institutions, because if you you erase the people is one thing, but if you erase the people's culture, you erase their tie to the land. And we've seen that through various initiatives to build on top of Palestinian villages historically, and through the continued looting of Palestinian archives.
Maya, you actually have been sharing your work on Palestinian archives on social media. Would you say that these archives just gained renewed importance in view of everything that's been happening?
Well, so I've been sharing Palestinian archives online, at least since 2015. And what I've noticed is every time there is a conflict or something happens in occupied Palestine or Gaza, or, you know, the reshares start to rise again. And mostly for a very long time, that was from the Palestinian community. But now I'd say it's become a little bit different, where my videos and my posts and whatever I post about historic Palestine gets shared far and wide. And I think that that's because I think people, I mean, I don't want to generalize, but I think a lot of people only see Palestine as this, you know, war zone or area where they're not like, they don't really see Palestinians as people. They just see them as either victims or terrorists. And now there's this hunger to learn more about what Palestine was like before all of this, or rather what Palestinians are like and what their stories are. And so I have been seeing a general, you know, sharing of my work that I haven't seen quite before. And I think that I mean, it's great. I think
it's interesting. Great. Yeah. Ahmed, I want to go back to the Freedom Theater. Jenin is known to be a center for Palestinian resistance across the West Bank. Where did the idea for the theater come from?
You know, it's all about this energy and all this beliefs that resistance, we want to resist. And the idea is about the identity itself. It's about the Israeli occupation are fighting us through everything they can, in any form they could. They steal our tradition, they steal our food, they steal our history, they steal our colors, they steal our dreams. So for them, they want to delete this identity. And for us, we were thinking a lot. And when Giuliano came with Zakaria Zubaydi, and Giuliano was saying, we all as a young people, we want to resist. But the point is not to die. The point to stay alive as long as you can and resist and bring your story all over the world. So for us, we were start to think how we create the culture of resistance, not just resistance culture. You know what I mean? So for us, we were telling people, as the Israelis fighting us through everything, it's our right to fight back and resist in any way we could. Everyone, as a teacher, as an engineer, as a doctor, as an actor, as an artist, as a mother, as a father, as a student, all of us, we should put in our minds, whatever we're doing is a resistance. So we were thinking how we can stay stay alive all we can, and we achieve more people, more communities, the international communities. So for us, we believe that theater and art, it's a language where everyone can understand it, everyone can belong to it. And for us, as Julian was saying too, and Zakaria, the stage is our AK-47. So for us, it's very important to consider any tool we can as a resistance through for this occupation, who, as you see clearly, they attacking everything. They have no respect, no values. They destroy schools, theaters, universities. It's like, which kind of people we talk about. So I think it's very important as a Palestinians to always looking for a new tools, for a new ways to keep fighting and resisting, because this occupation, this colonization, it's the hardest, ugliest colonization, occupation ever been happened in this humanity. So we need to be updated to keep resist in a way that shows
Gaza is enormous. The physical destruction, as Ahmed put it, is widespread. What is going to be the long-term impact of this?
You know, there's an African proverb that says when an elder dies, a library burns to the ground. And if we think the number of elders that we have lost throughout this genocide, it's hundreds upon thousands or thousands upon thousands of libraries at this point that have burned to the ground, because we have not only lost these individuals, we have lost their stories. We have lost recipes, their songs. We have lost everything that they knew of 1948, pre-1948 Palestine. There was a woman who was interviewed at the beginning of this genocide. Her name was Hadia Nasser, and she was born in 1944, and she had stories of pre-1948 Palestine, and unfortunately she was lost. She was killed. And I just keep thinking back to the stories that we lost with her. There was an academic who was named Abdul Karim Hashash, who was a folklorist, a prominent folklorist who kept Palestinian folklore and a special rare books collection. Not only did we lose him, but we lost his knowledge. We lost his rare book collection. And so this reverberates throughout society and for generations to come. The one thing that I will say about Palestinians is you can destroy our books and you can level our buildings, but you cannot destroy our spirit. And you can see that through the various songs that have come up throughout this conflict. You have seen
and furthering the Palestinian cause for liberation and emancipation. By destroying universities, museums, libraries, and archives, Israel seeks to make our memory, whether it's collective, institutional, inaccessible. It's an assault on continuity. They want to force people out of Gaza, but also they want to make sure that if people return to Gaza, they find nothing and dwell for eternity in this limbo of nothingness, in this void. Gaza's old city, with its mosques like Al-Umari or a church like the Church of Saint Porphyrius, testifies to Palestine's complex and multifaceted history. Al-Umari Mosque is the second oldest mosque in Palestine after Al-Aqsa Mosque. And from the footage that we've seen, it seems that the mosque was deliberately targeted, because there are photos that show surrounding buildings standing intact, while the mosque has been bombed to smithereens. So Israel is trying to impose a rupture between the present and the past, and of course the future. And destroying an iconic structure like Al-Umari Mosque is just part of that effort. The goal of targeting Gaza's archives is to make it impossible for people to rebuild and reclaim what has been lost. We did not only lose historical documents, but also land deeds, land registration, infrastructure plans and schemes. Now we hear all these reports of people going back to their neighborhoods and being unable to recognize where the street that they lived on was located, where their homes were. And they think that by destroying institutions or archives or looting museums, they can destroy Gaza as a place and therefore prevent people from returning there or re-establishing their lives. Gaza and its district have suffered a lot in terms of the targeting and destruction of historic and heritage sites. After 1967, after Gaza became under Israeli occupation, Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Dayan built an entire infamous career, in addition to being a war criminal, of looting artifacts from different parts of Gaza and Palestine and storing them in his own home. But also in the 1970s and 80s, Israeli forces, alongside Israeli archaeologists, looted a 4,500-year-old Canaanite cemetery located in Deir el-Balah, my hometown, and they took anything they could carry to the Israel National Museum. And today I go on the internet and I see artifacts that were stolen and looted from this site being sold around the world. And that makes you wonder if Israel's practices today are a new phenomenon or just a continuation of a long-standing pattern of destruction and looting of Palestinian history and culture. In this war alone, Palestinians in Gaza have lost towering figures in their society who shaped and defined the cultural and scholarly life in Gaza. And if there is one individual that captures the essence of this city and what it stands for, it's Rifat Larayr.
If the lions do not have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunters, will always glorify the occupier.
Rifat was killed while he was sheltering with his sister and her children. Before he was killed, he received a phone call from an Israeli officer warning him that they're after him. He was killed, his sister was killed, the children were killed, and his brother was also killed.
I'm an academic. Probably the toughest thing I have at home is an expo marker. But if the Israelis invade, if they target us, charge at us, open door to door to massacre us, I'm going to use that marker, throw it at the Israeli soldiers, even if that is the last thing that I would be able to do.
He was an important professor and a writer and a poet whose impact transcended his personal work to shaping and molding of a generation of English-speaking Palestinians in Gaza who mastered the art of telling their stories. But we've also lost a large number of cultural and literary figures, and of course many academics. This is an assault on the people who create meaning in society and who create the language that helps people understand and reflect on their reality. Israel knew what it has been doing and continues to do by attacking and going after our cultural and literary and intellectual figures. But Rifat, like Gaza, is an idea, and ideas don't die. Bodies can perish, cities can be destroyed, but the ideas that they stand for, the principles and the values, these are things that do not just vanish into thin air. They continue to exist and to inspire people.
यूनिवर्सल टेलीविजन को सब्सक्राइब करना ना भूलें, उसके बाद बेल बटन पे क्लिक करें और अपने कमेंट्स के सेक्शन में अपने कीमती जो ख्यालात का इजहार ज़रूर